Okay, so the title of your notes will be Section 3.17, Absolute Value. Absolute Value. Okay, so this is Section 3.17, Absolute Value. All right, so first what you need to know is what absolute value is. An absolute value means that a number's distance from zero on a number line. So it's a number's distance, and go ahead and underline distance because that's important, on a number line. All right, so when you're looking at a number's distance from zero, you're looking at the absolute value. Now, we also use symbols that look like this. The absolute value symbols, which are two tall lines, to show symbol, to show absolute value. Absolute value. All right, so we use these two symbols to show absolute value. Now note this is important. So note this is important. Absolute value, and this is a true statement, absolute value will never be negative. On their absolute value will always be positive. Absolute value will never be negative. Okay? So when we look at absolute value, and just off to the side of the paper, we'll just write the absolute value of -3. All right? So the way we actually do this is first we plot -3 on a number line. So 0's in the center, 1, 2, and 3. -1, 2, and -3. So we know -3 is right here on the number line to the left of 0. And then from -3 to 0, we know that's 3 units. So we know that the absolute value of -3 is just the distance from -3 to 0, and that is 3 units. 3 units is your answer. So there are 3 simple steps, and this can be on the other side of your paper, to solve absolute value. And you can abbreviate AV for absolute value. Okay? So there's 3 simple steps. There are 3 simple steps. Step 1 is to solve by create a number line and plot. So create your number line and plot. That's step 1. Step 2 is to solve your absolute value. Solve absolute value. So you just solve it. Okay, that's step 2. And step 3 is to compare your absolute values, and you can abbreviate AV with an apostrophe S. I'm okay with that, with inequalities. All right, that's it. So step 1 is create your number line and plot your integer or rational number. Step 2 is solve your absolute value, just like what we did here. And step 3 is just compare your AVs with inequalities. That's it. Let's see what this looks like. I'm going to write number 1, and number 1 is the absolute value of -2 and the absolute value of -4. All right. So step 1 is just to create your number line and plot, and just make sure you skip one line so you can add your arcs in there. And we are working with negative numbers. Here's 2, 4, -2, -4. All right, so just go ahead and plot it. So we know -2 is to the left of 0, and -4 is to the left of 0 as well. Okay, so draw your arcs. We know -2 is 2 units away from 0, and -4 is 4 units away from 0. So step 2 is just to solve your absolute values. So the absolute value of -4 we know is 4 units away from 0. And the absolute value of negative 2 is 2 units from 0. So step 2 is done. Step 3 is just compare your inequalities. So with inequalities, the absolute value of negative 4, we know that's a larger number, so the absolute value of negative 4 is greater than the absolute value of negative 2. That's it. That's it. The absolute value of negative 4 is greater than the absolute value of negative 2. That's it. Let's see another one. Number 2 is the absolute value of negative 120 and the absolute value of 160. All right, so step 1 is just to create your number line. Just skip a line so you can add your arcs in there. Try to keep it nice and straight. And then we have a negative and a positive number here. So just go and place 0 right in the center. And easy numbers to go up and down by would be 40, 80, 120, 160, negative 40, negative 80, negative 120, negative 160. All right, and then just plot. So negative 120, that's easy. That's to the left of 0, and 160 is to the right of 0. All right, so add your arcs in there. So we know from 0, 120, negative 120 is 120 units from 0, and 160 is 160 units from 0. Okay? So step 1's done. Step 2 is solve your absolute values. The absolute value of negative 120 is 120 units, just like what you wrote on your number line. And the absolute value of 160 is 160 units. Absolute value is always positive, always positive. So when you go to compare, step 2 is done. Step 3, just compare with inequalities. The absolute value of negative 120 is what compared to the absolute value of 160? Well, 120 is less than 160, so that is less than. Less than is your answer. That's it. That's it. Let's see another one. Let's see another one. Number 3 is the absolute value of negative 1/4 and the absolute value of negative 3/4. 3/4. All right. So step 1 is to plot your rational numbers. All right, so go ahead and plot your rational numbers. So we have 2 negatives here. So we'll just put 0 right here. We know 0 is on the number line. All right, there's 0. And the next number would be negative 1. All right, and think about easy increments that you can go down to negative 1/4 and negative 3/4. So we'll go down by quarters. Negative 1/4, negative 2/4, negative 3/4, and of course negative 4/4 is just negative 1. So we just plot those. Negative 1/4, plot, and negative 3/4, and go ahead and plot. All right, don't forget to arc. Add your arc. So add your arc in, that is 1, negative 1/4 is 1/4 unit away from 0. And negative 3/4 is 3/4 units away from 0. So step 1's done. Step 2 is just solve your absolute value. So the absolute value of negative 1/4 is 1/4. And the absolute value of negative 3/4 is 3/4. It's always positive. So step 2 is done. Step 3 is just compare the two. Negative 1/4, the absolute value of negative 1/4 is what compared to the absolute value of negative 3/4? Well, 3/4 is larger and 1/4 is smaller, so negative 1/4 absolute value is less than the absolute value of negative 3/4. Less than is your answer. That's it. That's it. Let's try one more. Let's try one more. Number 4 is the absolute value of 87 and the absolute value of negative 21. All right, so step 1 is draw that number line. And since we have a positive and a negative number, just place 0 right in the center. 20s would be easy to go up and down by. 60, 80, negative 20, negative 40, negative 60, negative 80. All right, and then just go ahead and plot. 87 is a positive to the right, so that'll be just past 80. And negative 21 is just to the left of negative 21. All right, just add your arc. And negative 21 is 21 units away from 0. And 87 is 87 units away from 0. So step 1's done. Step 2 is just solve your absolute value. The absolute value of 87 is 87 units. 87 units. Oh, forgot to write units over here. Units. Units. And the absolute value of negative 21 is 21 units. 21 units. So we know absolute value of 87. 87 is larger than 21. So the absolute value of 87 is greater than the absolute value of negative 21. Greater than is your answer. That's it. That's it. Go and try numbers 5, 6, and 7 on your own. Go and try numbers 5, 6, and 7 on your own. Number 5 is the absolute value of negative 2 and 3/10, and the absolute value of negative 2 and 75/100. All right, and then number 6 is absolute value of negative 9 and 11 over 9 over 11, and the absolute value of negative 4 over 11, 4/11. And number 7 is find the absolute value of negative 249 and 3/10 and absolute value of 249 and 6/10. All right, go and try numbers 5, 6, and 7. That would be a negative 249 and 6/10. Go and try numbers 5, 6, and 7 on your own.